Back home now, and we turn our attention to the state capture inquiry. Now, the director of a Russian-linked company, Grisak, I don't know if I'm saying that correct, Erin, has distanced itself from BNP Capital. BNP Capital was appointed by SAA to provide some narrow financial advice. For that, it was said to be paid 2.5 million rand. However, its scope widened to securing a loan, and the expected income rose to 225 million rand. Must be nice. Grisak was expected to provide BNP Capital with funds, and Erin Bates joins me now to unpack all of this. What a day it's been at the state capture inquiry. I've been glued to our live feeds. I've been glued to you just unpacking what we've just heard and what it means. It's been very, very interesting stuff. Now, Erin, let's start with this. BNP wrote to SAA, including cancellation fees in its pitch, which we now know was approved. Who did that?
So the chair of the board is the only person who approved those cancellation fees. And before we hear the evidence of Cynthia Stimple about that, I just need to explain why that's important. This 15 billion rand loan for SAA had a long and torrid history. SAA needed the money during a crisis around 2015. First, it was going to go with a company called Seacrest. One of the financiers behind Seacrest was that company Grisak, which comes up time and again in relation to this deal. They put Seacrest to the side because it doesn't check out in terms of due diligence and background checks. So then the Treasury Department at SAA says, let's go for a conglomeration of banks. Let's get a group of banks together and we'll get the 15 billion rand loan. But the board, under then Chair Dudu Myeni, comes back and says, rather, no, let's go with the Free State Development Corporation, which by law could not assist with this loan because the Free State Development Corporation develops corporations in the Free State. So then after a while, they drop that option. Although importantly, even with the Free State Development Corporation, Grisak is also behind the scenes as a potential financier for the deal. That's all scrapped again, and then they go with BNP Capital. First, just to provide some advice on this 15 billion rand loan, but then later on they decide, no, actually BNP Capital should go shopping around and get the full 15 billion rand. And who again is behind the scenes as a potential financier? Grisak. So who approved these cancellation fees, which meant if the whole deal with BNP Capital was suddenly off the table, that company could still have its Christmas. Here's who did that.
Chair, the evidence, or at least the documents, reveal that that recommendation then went to the board, and the only member of the board who in fact supported it was Ms. Myeni. The other members of the board in fact did not approve the cancellation fee of 49.9 million.
Now, Cynthia Stimple's personal story really fascinated me, and she gave some evidence today, or testimony today, just on some really personal goings on as she started realizing that something was amiss here, and that's what led to her becoming a whistleblower. And she was suspended soon thereafter, and like we heard, she said she was kind of expecting it. It wasn't a decision she took lightly. Why didn't more people speak up at SAA?
She spoke to that. She spoke to the climate at South African Airways, something we'd also heard about from advocate Kate Hofmeyer. And interestingly, just in terms of Stimple and her story, she did think very seriously about it. She thought about whistleblowing within SAA itself and following those structures, but a colleague said, it's not worth your time, you'll just be suspended, and they'll muzzle the whole issue. And so then she decided to go outside of SAA. But in terms of the reasons why others, colleagues around her in Treasury who knew this deal was totally dodgy, didn't speak out, is in the following clip.
What was transpiring around SA at the time, if anyone challenged what was being directed from board at the time or certain senior executives that have been placed in positions at the time, if you challenged anything that you knew was not correct, that you were immediately suspended. Your charges were not given at the time, and only afterwards charges were made up, and then you were given your charges. So it was a method. At the time I was suspended, there were at least 4 other people suspended. That's how many during my time. And it seemed to have been a pattern that you were given documents to sign, So your signature's on it. You weren't part of, like I was also given, and if you didn't question it and challenge it, the documents would be approved. But if you challenged it, they would find a way of getting you suspended. If you were tasked to do something, some people were tasked to get rid of certain people in their departments or find issues against them and suspend them. And if you challenged that, then they would, I won't say they, but senior management would try and find some issues against you to get you suspended. So it seemed to have been a pattern that was going around in those couple of months.
Now, there's a specific set of documents that she also spoke about that SAA claimed that she had no right to see. What did she have to say about that specific incident?
She believes that she had every right to see these documents about BNP Capital's agreements with SAA, and she claims she had that right as someone working in Treasury. As
somebody quite high up in that department.
The group treasurer for South African Airways. She also argued that National Treasury had every right to see those documents because National Treasury has a degree of oversight over an SOE getting a multi-billion rand loan, like this 15 billion rand loan that BNP Capital was going to organize. But the timing is important because by this stage, Simple has gone to go and speak to Outer, and she started to give Outer information on this problematic contract. She had also by that time given information to a National Treasury official and had even contemplated going to the public protector. So she meets with Outer, and then the very next day she goes to the office and asks a colleague for these particular documents. And this is what follows.
I came into the office. It was Ms. Nahansi's office. And in the meeting was Ms. Nahansi together with Mr. Makwela. I did not know him. I had no idea who he was. He introduced himself as the new... Thank you, sir. Manele.
Mr. Mbongeni Manele. M-A-N-Q-E-L-E. That is Manele.
Manele.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I entered the office, and the two people were sitting there, and I greeted and sat down, and Ms. Nahansi in front of her had a letter, and she pushed it across to me, and she said, "This is your suspension letter." And I said to her, I thought we were going to discuss what happened, why I took the documents, can I explain my side of the story, why I needed to see the documents. And she said, "Don't explain anything to me, you've been suspended, sign the letter." And I said to her, "Do I have any legal recourse?" And she said, "Oh, you can go to the CCMA and you need to find your own legal representative at your own costs." I read through the letter. It stated that I had obviously, I've been suspended due to taking confidential information that was lying on the floor, confidential information that I was not privy to according to the statement, and that I have therefore been duly suspended until further investigation.
Now, Aaron Bates, until these last 2 days, nobody would have ever heard of Cynthia Stimple, and that's been the amazing thing about the Zondo Commission. We've come to know people that normally just operate behind the scenes at these big SOEs and big organizations. What do we know about Cynthia Stimple?
Well, what we know about Stimple is that she had a long tenure in the banking sector before she moved over to work in SAA structures. She had a number of different roles in finances. For example, she worked on risk assessment and management at SAA for a while. She also testified that she was a deputy for several seniors before she acted as a provisional or acting group treasurer and then had a more permanent position in that role. And her skill and competence in that role is something that's come up as a point of contention for some of the people she's implicated. For example, Ms. Nancy, who's going to testify likely next week. What is also interesting, I found just doing some research online, is that she practices yoga.
Oh.
And I did wonder if maybe that gave her some sort of strength, both physically and mentally, when she decided to blow the whistle on this profoundly problematic and likely highly irregular, if not illegal, contract at SAA.
One does need to get a kind of inner like zen before doing something like what she has had to do and has has continued to do over the last 2 days. Thank you so much, Erin, based on top of things at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, as per usual. Thank you so much.